morning everyone. Today's topic is male genital system. I am going to give an introduction about the male genital system. So we are going to discuss the following topic under the subheadings: diseases of the penis, diseases of the testis and epididymis, and diseases of the prostate. This is how we deal with the male genital system. And today I am going to discuss the disease of the penis. So coming to the penis normal histology, if you see, penis is covered by a skin, as you know, and skin is lined by pigmented Stratford squamous epithelium. Beneath the penis, there is beneath the Stratford squamous epithelium, there is tunica albuginea. This is all the tunica albuginea, and the erectile tissue, which is the most important component, which is responsible for the retraction of the penis, is held by the blood vessels, and these blood vessels, they are in the form of two corpora spongiosum, two spaces of corpus spongiosum, two spaces of corpus cavernosum, and one space of corpus spongiosum. So corpus spongiosum and corpora cavernosa are the ones which are responsible for the erectile function of the penis. And this corpus spongiosum contains the urethral opening also. This is the urethra, which is the content in the corpus spongiosum. So the penis, coming to the normal histology, it's a Stratford squamous epithelial lining of the skin, beneath which there is a tunica albuginea, beneath which there is cavernous spaces in the form of corpus spongiosum and corpora cavernosa, and it also includes the urethra in it. And diseases of the penis are dealt in the following subheadings: congenital anomalies, inflammatory conditions, and tumors. Coming to the congenital anomalies, first one is the phimosis. In the phimosis, normally the foreskin of the penis can be retracted back, and the smegma which is present over the tip of the penis is usually washed. This is how a hygiene of the penis is maintained. But in phimosis, what happens is the prepusal orifice is very small. This is a defect in which the prepusal orifice is too small, so that the foreskin cannot be retracted back. So the foreskin is not retracted back, due to which there is accumulation of the smegma. Smegma is nothing but the discomated squamous epithelial cells, sweat, and the debris which are present over the tip of the penis. So the smegma cannot be cleared off, because of which there is recurrent infections, and due to which there is fibrosis, and the orifice remains closed. And this phimosis can occur congenitally, that is from the birth this can be a defect, or acquired due to recurrent infections and or due to a trauma. Here this is a picture showing, this is a normal penis. Here you can see this is the foreskin which can be retracted back, and the smegma which is present here, smegma which is accumulated here, can be washed off. But here in phimosis, what happens is the orifice of the prepuce is too small, so that the foreskin cannot be retracted back, and the smegma accumulates, and there is chances of frequent secondary infections. Next is the paraphimosis. In the paraphimosis, here also the same as in the phimosis, the prepusal orifice is small. But what happens is in paraphimosis, there is forcible retraction of the foreskin. Foreskin is tight and forcibly retracted back, and it gets stuck over here at the coronal sulcus region. And this results in a constriction over the glans penis, and this leads to swelling of this area. Normally, as in the phimosis, there is prepusal, or the orifice of the prepuce is too small. It's not normally retracted back. But if you do a forcible retraction back up to the coronal sulcus, it gets stuck up there, and this results in a paraphimosis. And this is a picture showing the paraphimosis. And here you can see the foreskin is retracted behind the coronal sulcus. Next one is a hypospadias. Spadias are one, hypospadias and epispadias are the there is a defect in the urethral canal and the urethral groove, due to which the urethral opening, which should be open at the tip of the penis, it fails to reach the tip of the penis, and instead it opens on the ventral surface of the penis. Ventral means that is the back side of the penis. Here you can see this is the ventral surface of the penis. Instead of opening here, the tip of the urethra is opening at the ventral surface of the penis. This is the hypospadias. Whereas in the epispadias, the urethral meatus opens on the dorsal surface of the penis. Here it has to be open. It is opening on the dorsal surface of the penis. In hypospadias and epispadias, there is urethral canal defect or urethral groove defect, or there is a urinary tract defect, due to which this orifice is also too small, so there is normal urinary flow is not maintained. So there is urinary obstruction, due to which there is recurrent ascending infections in hypospadias and epispadias patients. And coming to the inflammatory conditions affecting the penis, these can be specific infections or non-specific infections. Specific infections include the sexually transmitted diseases like syphilis, gonorrhea, lymphogranuloma venerum, genital herpes, etc., which are dealt in your infections topic. Now I am not discussing that. Coming to the non-specific infection, the most important and the one you have to know is belanoposthitis. It is the inflammation involving the glands and prepuce. Belanoposthitis is the inflammation involving the glands and prepuce. This is due to the poor local hygiene because of the smegma which is accumulated and it's not washed off regularly. The smegma accumulates there, and this leads to infection with the organisms like Staphylococcus, anaerobic bacteria, candida, etc., due to which there is secondary infection. And melanoposthitis is one of the cause for phimosis. Due to the recurrent infection, the orifice may get closed and there is no foreskin retraction back, due to which phimosis results. And next one is a Peyronie disease. This is a increased fibroblastic proliferation resulting in fibrous bands involving the corpus cavernosum, due to which the fibrous bands accumulate in the corpus cavernosum, due to which there is lateral curvature of the penis. Instead of the penis being straight, there is lateral curvature of the penis because of the increased fibroblastic activity and the fibrous plaque accumulation in the corpus cavernosum region of the penis. There is lateral curvature of the penis. Next is the tumors. Tumors are dealt in the following headings: benign, pre-malignant and malignant. Coming to the benign, most common ones are condyloma acuminata. These are also called anogenital warts. So these are the warts, anogenital warts, which are also called as condyloma acuminata. And HPV, human papilloma virus 6 and 11 are responsible for it, are the causative organisms. Most commonly, HPV6 is the most common etiological factor. Usually involves the coronal sulcus or inner surface of the penis. Most common site being the inner surface of the penis or coronal sulcus. And this is the same picture. Here you can see these are the warts which are seen on the coronal sulcus area, and this is the multiple warts, papillary excrescences. Warts are nothing but the papillary excrescences. These can be single, multiple, flat, sessile, pedunculated papillary excrescences. These can take any form, and here you can see it involves the entire penis, distorting the entire penis morphology. And coming to the microscopic features of the condyloma acuminata, the three characteristic features are hyperkeratosis, acanthosis, and coilocytosis. What is hyperkeratosis? Hyperkeratosis is increase in the keratin layer. This is the keratin layer over the surface of the squamous epithelium. Here you can see the thickness of the keratin layer is increased. This is the hyperkeratosis. This is all the hyperkeratosis which is seen over the surface over the stratified squamous epithelium. Next is the acanthosis. There is acanthosis is hyperplasia of the squamous epithelium, increased thickness of the squamous epithelium. Normally squamous epithelium is 6 to 7 layered. Here you can see the thickness of the squamous epithelium is increased to a great extent, and this is the acanthosis, increase in the thickness of the squamous epithelium. Next is the coilocytosis. This is a very typical feature of human papilloma virus. This is the viral induced cytopathic changes. Here you can see the coilocytic change. This is in coilocytic change. What happens is there is nucleomegaly. There is some dysplasia in the nucleus, and there is a perinuclear halo surrounding the perinuclear cytoplasmic halo surrounding the nucleus. So you can see if you compare this nucleus, the cell morphology here and here, you can compare, you can find the difference. Here there is nucleomegaly, there is perinuclear cytoplasmic vacuolation. There is a clear cytoplasm surrounding the nucleus. This is the coilocytic change which is typical of condyloma acuminata. Hyperkeratosis, acanthosis and coilocytosis. Next one is the pre-malignant lesions. In the pre-malignant lesions, we are going to discuss the Bowen disease, Bovenoid papulosis and erythroplasia of Queret. This is a Bowen disease. This is either this can be a patchy papule or a flat ulcer. It is usually single in number and usually occurs on the dorsal or ventral surface of the penis. And this is the Bowen disease picture. Next is the Bovenoid papulosis. It looks similar to the Bowen's disease, whereas these are multiple papules occurring over the preputial region. And next is the erythroplasia of Queret. This is an erythematous lesion involving the glands of the penis. So all the areas, glands is most commonly involved, and Bowen's disease, it's usually a single papule which occurs on the surface of the glands, whereas in Bovenoid papulosis, multiple papules are seen, and in erythroplasia, it is an erythematous lesion occurring over the surface of the glands. And all the three have the same morphology. It is a carcinoma in situ. You know carcinoma in situ. It is the dysplasia involving all the layers of the stratified squamous epithelium, but the dysplasia is confined to the epithelium. There is no invasion into the stroma. The basement membrane is intact. There is no invasion into the stroma, and the dysplasia is confined only to the epithelium. Then the name carcinoma in situ implies. So, in all the three Bowen's disease, Bovenoid papulosis and erythroplasia of Queret, the dysplasia, there is carcinoma in situ picture, but there is no invasion into the stroma. Later on, they may progress towards the malignancy features. As a pre-malignant lesion, it is a carcinoma in situ which present. Later on, some genetic mutations occur and they may transform into a malignancy, a squamous cell carcinoma. Once the invasion occurs, they may transform into a squamous cell carcinoma. Bowen's disease usually occurs in greater than 35 years of age, and usually it progresses to the squamous cell carcinoma. Very high risk of squamous cell carcinoma transformation is present in Bowen's disease. Bovenoid papulosis, it's usually occur in younger adults, usually occur in persons less than 30 years of age, and sometimes they spontaneously regress back, and there is very less chance of transformation of squamous cell carcinoma in Bovenoid papulosis cases. In erythroplasia of Queret, this is also a carcinoma in situ. Morphologically, if you see, this also implies carcinoma in situ features, but there is also a transformation of squamous cell carcinoma in at least 20 to 30% of the cases. Compared to all the three, Bowen's disease carries a higher risk of squamous cell carcinoma transformation. Next is the squamous cell carcinoma. Squamous cell carcinoma of penis, usually it's HPV related to the strains 16 and 18. Usually occurs in the age group of 45 to 60 years, and poor local hygiene is one of the risk factor for the squamous cell carcinoma. Why poor local hygiene? The smegma which accumulates, if not cleared regularly, it acts as an irritant, and this irritation causes some mutations due to which there is squamous cell carcinoma transformation. So people who have circumcision early in life, like Jews and Muslims, they have a ritual of circumcision. So in these people, what happens is the foreskin is cut off. Circumcision is the process in which a part of the foreskin is cut off. So in these people, the smegma is not accumulated because the smegma is usually accumulated underneath the foreskin, over the glands. So the smegma is not accumulated and it's cleared off regularly, due to which they have a protective role. Circumcision has a protective role in squamous cell carcinoma. The tumor usually take a lymphatic route of spread and usually is spread to the regional lymph nodes like inguinal and the intra-abdominal pelvic lymph nodes. Whereas the hematogenous spread is very rare in squamous cell carcinoma of the penis, and usually the lymph nodes are the main ones which are involved in squamous cell carcinoma of the penis. HPV 16 and 18 and are the most important strains responsible for the squamous cell carcinoma. For the condyloma acuminata, it's the HPV 6 and 11. And 45 to 60 years is the age group involved, and circumcision plays a very important protective role in squamous cell carcinoma, and the spread is, route of spread is lymphatic spread, most commonly involving the inguinal lymph nodes as the primary site of metastasis. And the squamous cell carcinoma can occur as a cauliflower exophytic growth or an ulcerative growth or an endophytic growth. So exophytic, this is a picture showing the exophytic cauliflower like growth, and it can also occur as multiple ulcers or a single ulcer over the glans penis. And here you can see this is a well differentiated squamous cell carcinoma picture. Here you can see the dysplastic cells. Squamous cell carcinoma is a slide for you also. So how do you say it is a well differentiated carcinoma or a moderately differentiated or a poorly differentiated carcinoma? If it's a well differentiated, differentiation is resemblance to the normal cell type. So resemblance to the normal cell type in structure as well as a function. In a well differentiated carcinoma, normally the squamous cell, as you know, the normal structure is polygonal in shape with a central small nucleus and abundant cytoplasm. If our tumor is, if our tumor has a and the intercellular bridges are present in the normal, intercellular bridges are present in between the squamous cells in normal squamous cells. So if a tumor is having a abundant cytoplasm, abundant eosinophilic cytoplasm, and intercellular bridges are maintained in between the cells, and the function of the squamous cell is keratin production. And in the tumor, if keratin pearls are present, it's called a well differentiated carcinoma. Resemblance, the more resemblance with the normal structure and function, it is called as a well differentiated carcinoma. Anything, if you take a squamous cell carcinoma or adenocarcinoma, adenocarcinoma is said to be well differentiated when it contains more of glands, like the normal glands. The glands are dysplastic, but if it contains more of glands rather than sheets of cells, it's called a well differentiated adenocarcinoma. Squamous cell carcinoma is the same. Squamous cell carcinoma's function is keratin production. Structure, it has a polygonal shape with a single nucleus, and it contains abundant eosinophilic cytoplasm with intercellular bridges in between the squamous cells. In squamous cell carcinoma also, here this is the keratin which is produced in the form of keratin pearl, and here you can see abundant cytoplasm you can see, and then it is called a squamous cell carcinoma, well differentiated squamous cell carcinoma. Here you can see why you are calling it as carcinoma, why it's not a normal cell if the normal keratin and the abundant cytoplasm is maintained. Because here you can see the cells are very large, pleomorphic. Here you can see abnormal size of the nucleus. These are all pleomorphic, varying in shapes and sizes, and some are showing prominent nucleoli. Prominent nucleoli are also seen. So the pleomorphic and dysplastic features are seen in a carcinoma. So it cannot be, it cannot mimic just a normal cell, but it resembles somewhat. Some of the features resemblance is seen in between the carcinoma and normal. We can say it as squamous cell. Seeing it, the abundant eosinophilic cytoplasm and the keratin pearl, we can maintain the resemblance is maintained between the normal squamous cells and the carcinoma cell. Next topic is the testis. So in the penis, what we have learned is, we have learned the congenital anomalies like phimosis, paraphimosis, hypospadias, epispadias, etc. And next one is the, we have learned about pre-malignant lesions, Bowen's disease, Bowennoid papillosis, inflammations also we have learned about inflammations like specific infections, non-specific infections. In the non-specific infection, melanocystitis is the one. And next one is the Peyronie disease. And next are the tumors. In the benign tumors, condyloma acuminata is the most commonly encountered tumor, benign tumor in the penis. These are nothing but the genital warts. And next one is the Premalignant lesions, Bowen's disease, Bowenoid papulosis, erythroplasia of Tourette, which have a chances of, which carry the risk of transformation to squamous cell carcinoma. Next one is the squamous cell carcinoma. Here you can see the cauliflower-like growth and the well-differentiated squamous cell carcinoma microscopic picture. Next is the testis. Testis, the normal histology of the testis contains, it's covered by a tunica albuginea, and underneath the tunica albuginea, number of seminiferous tubules are contained. It contains the number of seminiferous tubules, and the space in between the seminiferous tubules is the interstitial tissue. And this interstitial tissue contains the Leydig cells, which are a source of LH and FSH. And this maintains the Leydig cells are the one which maintains the seminiferous tubules. And these seminiferous tubules contain germ cells in varying degrees of differentiation. That is, these are the lowermost part contains the spermatogonia. As we move towards the lumen, the spermatogonia differentiate and form the spermatids and the sperms. So these lymphocyte-like structures are these small lymphocyte. These are the spermatids. These differentiate and form the sperms with the tails. So as we move towards the lumen from the base, the differentiation occurs, and once they come into the lumen, in the lumen, the sperms, the mature sperms are usually seen. The mature sperms, they enter through the lumen, they enter into the epididymis, vas, and they and normal semen is they form a part of the semen. And these seminiferous tubules, all apart from the germ cells, they also contain Sertoli cells. The Sertoli cells they maintain the nutrition of the germ cells. They provide the nutrition to the germ cells. And the interstitial tissue contain these are the Leydig cells which are present, which produce the hormones which maintain the seminiferous tubules. And testis is dealt in the following headings: congenital anomalies, regressive changes, inflammation, and vascular disorders. Now today I am going to tell only the congenital anomalies. In the congenital anomalies, the most important is the cryptorchidism. It's a very common feature. You can see in the wards also, children with cryptorchid testis. Crypto means hidden. Orchid means testis. So the testis is hidden here. Normally the testis is present in the scrotum. And in the fetal life, it is present in the abdomen. In the fetal life, during the maturation and differentiation, the testis from the abdomen descends and enters into scrotum. By the time of birth, the scrotum contains the testis. But in cryptorchidism, what happens is there is somewhere the testis do not descend, and it gets somewhere stuck in during the path of the descent. So cryptorchidism, it implies undescended testis. The testis is arrested or stuck at some point along its path of descent, and usually it's seen in 0.2% of the male population. Most common site is inguinal ring. It is the inguinal ring is the most common site. Here you can see this is the abdomen. From the abdomen, it has to enter into the inguinal canal, and it has to reach this is the inguinal ring, and it has to reach the scrotum, base of the scrotum. This is a normal path of the descent of the testis. In cryptorchidism, what happens is it either remains in the abdomen, it either remains in the inguinal canal, or it either remains at the level of the inguinal ring. So at any point it can remain, and and the scrotum remains empty. So just after the birth, what the pediatrician checks is, pediatrician goes through the child and checks for any malformations or congenital anomalies which are present in the baby. First thing he usually checks is, because it is a very common thing, cryptorchidism is a very common thing, they usually check for the scrotum. If the scrotum contains testis, it's a normal thing. If the scrotum do not contain testis, then it is somewhat worrisome, and some intervention has to be needed at a later age. So the inguinal ring is the most common site of cryptorchid testis, accounting for 60 to 70% of the cases. Next is the inguinal, it may stuck up at the inguinal canal or at the level of abdomen. What can be the causes for the cryptorchid testis? The causes are divided into three types, three categories. One is the mechanical factors, second one is the genetic factors, and third one is the hormonal factors. First one is the mechanical factors. In the mechanical factors, there may be a short spermatic cord due to which there is descent normally don't occur, or the inguinal canal is very narrow, or adhesions at the level of peritoneum. All these are the mechanical factors contributing to the cryptorchid testis. And genetic factors like trisomy 13 or the maldevelopment of the scrotum, or some muscles involving in the descent, they may be maldeveloped, due to which there is cryptorchid testis. And hormones also play an important role in the testicular descent, and hormones like testosterone, LH, FSH, these are deficient, due to which there is cryptorchid testis. The stimulus for the descent is absent and there is no descent. And if you see a gross picture of the cryptorchid testis, the testis is small in size and is fibrotic and it's shrunken. And coming to the microscopy, if you see the microscopy, this is the basement membrane of the seminiferous tubules. There is thickened basement membrane of the seminiferous tubules. There is thickening of the seminiferous tubules, and there is hyalinization of the basement membrane of the seminiferous tubule. In the lumen, if you see, in the inside of the seminiferous tubules, if you see, there are no germ cells in the seminiferous tubules. Only Sertoli cells are remained. So there is absence of germ cells. Only Sertoli cells are left. And in the interstitial tissue, if you see, the interstitial tissue contains more of Leydig cells, and these Leydig cells, there is hyperplasia of the Leydig cells. As the germ cells are not there, there is a negative stimulus, and there is Leydig cell proliferation, due to which. So thickening of the basement membrane resulting in hyalinization of the basement membrane. There is no or very minimal amount of germ cells which are present. There are Sertoli cells which are present in the lumen of the seminiferous tubules. And if you see the interstitium, there is edema, fibrosis, and there is Leydig cell hyperplasia. And clinically, if you see, usually they are asymptomatic. If you check, only if the physician checks, then only we come to know there is no testis in the scrotum. So usually asymptomatic in the young age, that is, if the pediatrician do not have a keen eye on the testis, on the scrotum, the testis is usually missed. So asymptomatic, but on a later stages, what happens is they are prone for infertility, and they are very prone for trauma and torsion because of the abnormal position of the testis. They are very scrotum is a very safe and ideal site for the testis. If the testis is present at the other sites, not other than the scrotum, like inguinal canal or in the abdomen, they are very prone for trauma. And these cryptorchid testis are usually associated with cases of inguinal hernia also. So there is a co-association between cryptorchid testis and the inguinal hernia. And the most important is they are at a very high risk of testicular cancers. And most common germ cell neoplasms which occur in testicular cryptorchid testis is seminoma and yolk sac tumor. So most important feature is the testicular germ cell neoplasms which occur in the cryptorchid testis. That is the most important point. That's a very important bit also for you. Most importantly, seminoma and yolk sac tumors are the most important tumors which occur in the cryptorchid testis. And coming to the treatment, orchipexy. Orchipexy is we make the testis to descend to the scrotum. So the clinician, the surgeon, what he does is he makes he removes the testis from the abdomen or the inguinal canal or inguinal ring, and he places in the scrotum. That is the orchipexy. But when is it needed? Usually less than some children. What happens is, up to 1 year of age, they have a chance of descent. So the clinician usually checks for the descent up to till the age of 1 year. So he watches for the descent. If any descent occurs even after the later life, he watches up to the 1 year of age. Even after 1 year, if there is no chance of descent, then they do a surgery. They do a surgery called orchipexy. That is the placement of the testis in the scrotum before the age of 2 years. Why before the age of 2 years? Why not after? To decrease the risk of infertility and the testicular germ cell neoplasms, we usually do at the age of less than 2 years. If we keep the testis at, if we do not do a orthopexy after before the age of 2 years, we are increasing the risk of testicular germ cell neoplasm. There is no use even if you do the orthopexy at a later stage also, because the germ cell neoplasm risk is maintained even after orthopexy if you do at a later stage. So earlier the intervention, that is earlier means not earlier than the 1 year of age, but usually it is done at the age of 2 years, less than 2 years it is done to decrease the risk of germ cell neoplasm. Even if you do it a later stage, that is after 5 years, after 6 years, if you do also, there is no much much you can do for the patient, because the risk of germ cell neoplasms is maintained even after even if you do it a very later stage. So the ideal age is around 2 years is the ideal age for orthopexy. So with this, I'm completing the topic, and next tomorrow we'll continue this topic. Thank you.
ఉందాం.